technical work. And when I was teaching, I was really thinking a lot about integration of arts and sciences and all of those projects that involve bigger types of design thinking and creative learning. So I went overseas after teaching in the US, and I taught middle school and high school. I've taught in the US, in Belgium, and in Switzerland. And then after over a decade of teaching and incorporating a lot of mindfulness and SEL into the practices, I started the company MindWise. And my work with MindWise has been really fun because it lets me work with people of all ages. Like the theme is for me that we learn throughout our lifespan. Mm-hmm. So sometimes some of my work leads me to connect with startups, with people doing innovative business involving artificial intelligence, and also in schools, really looking at the well-being of teachers and students and also parents and the whole school community. Basically, how do we thrive in this rapid pace environment where it seems like it's a great thing that tech is taking off. It's a great thing that we have all these social tools. And in the midst of it, not just how do we restore sanity, but how do we be our best selves and have that effective presence and connection. So I love the work that I'm doing, and I'm talking with everyone from California. So welcome if you're here in the morning or if you're here in the afternoon. It's just a great time that Tamara asked me to be part of this and sit down together. And I'm a big fan of hers. So it's nice for us, I think, just to have this time carved out to connect for the two of us.
Well, I'm so excited that you're here. And I know Caitlin and I are new friends, and when we talked a few months ago, we were like, okay, we know that we need to do something together. What's the first thing that we can do? So this is the first of hopefully many collaborations between us with Love in a Big World and MindWise. So let's start digging into mindfulness-based stress reduction. Can you tell us more about what that is?
Yes, I'd love to actually talk about this. And I think just so the community knows, I'm watching the chat window, and we'll be talking about it throughout this session together. I have all kinds of resources because I was meditating about this yesterday, the history of SEL, history of mindfulness, I think in sketch notes. So what I want to do is just tell people after this session, I'm going to just take a snapshot of my sketch notes and share it out. And I know I'd shared with Tamara that there's a bit.ly that I set up so that people could put their email down if they're interested in having the resources from this chat. We'll talk more about that. But I was really looking back because I thought, well, question my own assumptions. SEL is one of those buzzwords that maybe, maybe I think I know everything about it, but I did some research yesterday, and I know we're talking about history of SEL and a little bit of MBSR and a little bit of mindfulness. So should I start with MBSR, I guess?
Sure.
Okay. Just to break it down, in a nutshell.
Yes.
MBSR is an acronym that stands for Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. And people might have heard of it already. It's usually an 8-week program. Adults can take it in all kinds of corporate settings or on your own or do a retreat. This was started mostly by John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts when he was doing his medical studies. And then he was working with people with post-traumatic stress syndromes and disorders. And really, it's a combination. In different interviews, I like what he said. He doesn't take credit of being, the godfather of it. He says that it's an interconnectivity of emergences, which I found fascinating. Like, basically, the time was right. This was around 1979.
Okay.
Research had been just starting. They just started to have the medical technology to see what's happening in the brain. Scientific revolutions were happening. And I think people were also looking for different ways to encompass well-being, post different war times, people just really looking at problems that exist and our maybe natural tendency to stuff them down and not talk about them. And a lot of mindfulness-based stress reduction is about not denying that there are feelings and emotions that exist,
Mm-hmm.
but noticing them and watching them with an embodied kindness toward that feeling that's coming up rather than denying it, and then learning how to self-regulate, and how to use those emotions, to really understand that sometimes we are not our thoughts, that we can
Mm-hmm.
experience something and watch it, and not have to own it forever. Yeah, so we can talk more about that. The MBSR program took off. They started doing a lot of studies, collaborations with Richie Davidson at the University of Wisconsin, and that was in Madison. And I think throughout the 80s, they were really looking at, I should mention mindfulness at MBSR and John Kabat-Zinn, they call it a secular approach. So it has its origins in Buddhism, but it's not, well, John Kabat-Zinn says, don't think of it as dualistic. It's not,
Right.
not something. It has its kind of pedigree from those practices that are really ancient, but it's not saying that you have to follow a certain religion or faith to practice mindfulness. You could just sit and be with yourself and learn the practices and be doing it in a completely secular way. So
Mm-hmm.
it took off from there. And he would call that practice awareness of the present moment on
Mm-hmm.
purpose without judgment.
So I find it fascinating that you said that MBSR started around 1979, because that would have been post Vietnam,
Yeah.
post civil rights movement, and all the trauma that happened in our country as a result of those historic events. And I also find it fascinating, that connection between Buddhism and spirituality, mindfulness, the stress reduction. I mean, it makes sense, right? Because we're holistic people. And so often, especially in education, we tend to bifurcate and say, well, you can function in this manner here in this setting, forgetting that we really are whole beings, body, soul, and spirit. So thank you for sharing that with us. What I'm wondering is, for when it comes down to the mindfulness-based stress reduction, what are some strategies, some really hands-on strategies that teachers or parents could use with their kids?
Interesting. Well, this would be a whole different realm because I just started talking about MBSR. It's a frame, but we could also talk about mindfulness itself. Because
Mm-hmm.
the mindfulness-based stress reduction is a program that really has a set. I've taken the program. For example, one of the practices there could be, notice I'm adjusting myself in the chair. So
Mm-hmm.
it could be, why talk about it, where I could invite everyone here just to do one with me for about, I don't know, I'll try to make it 30 seconds. But yeah, so you naturally sit and just start trying to put your awareness into your right foot as you're sitting here in the chair
Mm-hmm.
or standing. And as you're guiding your awareness, you're focusing really on your foot and the way your foot feels, and it's your right foot, not your left foot. And just see if you can press your big toe into the carpet or floor, maybe through your sock or the sole of your shoe, and see if you can feel that press back, just that feeling of whatever. Maybe it's a soft feeling, maybe it's a hard feeling, but just feel how that feels for a moment, just to, in an instant, direct your focus into one place on your body. Maybe slow your breath for a moment and exhale. Yeah, and as you press your toe, then just gently bring your awareness back to your whole foot. Maybe you want to wiggle your toes around a little bit, move them around with the floor, and that we talk about this practice. It's something so simple. Some of these little things are things you can do in a doctor's office if you feel nervous and fidgety as you're waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Parents could do this with their kids, just to kind of play around and say, oh, can you feel how that part is feeling? Because I sometimes take for granted all the places my feet bring me during the day. I forget to notice how I'm feeling. And so often in the jobs we do, we're trained to think from the neck up. And so these practices just bring us back to ourselves. And some are deeper and more contemplative, and others are simple like that. But they're kind of body hacks because I work a lot with VR, and I like to think of the body now as the carrier of my sensory inputs. Like basically everything that I'm experiencing in this environment is brought to me both by my inner consciousness, but also by my senses. And if I forget to tune into the way that my fingers feel, or touching a tree, the way that the bark feels, it sounds so basic, but we're creatures, you know, we're not in nature, we are nature. So you can do these exercises to kind of just spice up the moment, and also teach someone how to form a different language with their relationship with themselves, especially if they've stopped learning to feel their environment.
Well, and I could see that for somebody who's been through trauma, or for somebody who, like a child who is becoming deregulated during a classroom setting because of some stressor, that just calling them back into attention, be mindful of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your body's doing, can really help them calm down.
Yep. And notice I wasn't saying be still, be quiet, deny yourself, you know, you must do this, because the mindful framing is more of an invitation to experience. And there are certain necessary conditions that create that connection. And part of it, I I had written right underneath our title how to have that open space, like that space for reflection. So many teachers that I talk with lately say, I feel a need to slow down, or parents, I need to slow down. And it doesn't mean taking a time out of life. It means to kind of take back this moment. Like this moment now is technically the only moment we have to experience. So as soon as you start to realize that, then a lot of the external pressures, yes, they matter, yes, they're there, but being able to be present allows you to really take each one at a time, and still be with yourself, if that makes sense.
It does. I've been thinking a lot lately about the violence we commit against ourselves because we're in such a hurry, and how imperative it is for us to slow down, like we're talking about today, in order to be healthy in every way. And I think especially because we have screens and that constant opportunity to interact with someone or something, we have to teach our kids how to do that as well. We have to teach them that it's okay to put that down. It's okay to be present right here, right now, with the people around you, not just the people on your screen. Yeah.
And you take a chance with it. And I know, you know, certain hikes, certain experiences with kids, you say put it away, and it's hard at first. It's actually, I think right now, if we were to ask everybody on this webinar, you know, do you know where your phone is? If you didn't know, you might have a certain sense of unease or panic. And I think, you know, this is the culture we live in. But, you know, caveat, even though I know where my phone is, I could put it away. And it's like the moment after that moment is when the benefits start to open up. I ended up having students say, thank goodness we took, you know, the cell phones and just put them away, because we ended up having all these great conversations, and it was refreshing. But they needed that reminder from adults and leaders about doing it. I don't know if they would have just voluntarily given away the phone.
Right. So I want to jump to something now, because since we're talking about phones and screens and tech, and SEL, mindfulness, can you talk a little bit more about your views, your experiences? How do we bridge that tension between the technology being everywhere and being present in the moment? And how do we teach our kids about that too?
This is this is such a big question.
It is, I know.
Because to me, the how, well, I always start with the why. I'm a Simon Sinek fan. So I know the reason behind it. You know, my mission is to empower connection. And I know that meaningful connection happens when you're present and when you're able to reach out to the world and to others in a meaningful way. And you can't really do that without a certain level of listening and co-sensing and co-presence. So some of these projects and leadership work that I've been doing has been about how you foster that sensibility. And the big question is, can we do it with tech? Like, can we do it with tech? What are the choices? You know, the how is going to have to come down, I think, to a certain level of discipline that comes from self-compassion. Like really just, it sounds dualistic, but I think understanding ourselves and what drives us. If certain, you know, tech is not evil, of course. It's how we use it. It's how we integrate it. For me, I've found a lot of benefits in virtual reality and augmented reality. And I've come from some of the research to realize that when my brain thinks something is true, like if I'm in an experience in VR, it becomes real. It is virtual reality, but my level of presence and engagement when I'm in there is actually in some ways more authentic. So, you know, I think that it takes a level of stepping back and looking at the big picture of our lives and saying, okay, if I want to accomplish this and this and this, and I know that using technology helps me in certain ways, and this is going to be true more and more with AI and with voice recognition software. And, you know, I see a lot of things happening in the tech world that could be used for connection. We just need to make sure that we're amplifying the right levels of types of products. And I think for education, probably the future is going to be more about the management of a system, how it works together. Right now, I think it's great. We're discovering different apps and tools and how they work together. And I kind of visualize this map, like looking at the terrain of everything. And in the midst of it all, I actually think mindfulness gives me a level of humor about it, because I realize, wow, I need this, and I need it as a reminder to myself that life is not supposed to be scripted and perfect and perfectly predictable, and that's what makes it real and human. So it's a complex question. I would say it's okay, you know, to feel like we hit stumbling blocks with tech and that sometimes it becomes overpowering. It's very visceral and it's very appealing in ways. And I think just remembering that we're human in the midst of all of it is part of the lesson. Yeah. And for me, I think mindfulness helps me, which I'll get into in a little bit if we want to go into that definition. But
yes, please do.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of people, you know, we're talking about mindfulness and we talked about MBSR, but I have 3 A's that I use for it. So even as I'm talking with you about these concepts, I keep thinking about, oh yeah, you know, and the 3 A's ground me, because for me, mindfulness is about awareness of myself and others. So that's the first A. And the second A is advancing. You know, I think about whether I'm, for example, using tech to advance and to really have the experiences I want in life, you know, versus just to be kind of mind numb about it. It makes me more aware of using my goal setting and also getting rid of some of the limiting beliefs that we might have carried with us. And then the third A with mindfulness is authenticity, you know, and that's the non-judgment part, like how to be authentic, how to get, you know, Brene Brown vulnerability as part of our lifestyle, you know, is something that we don't just wear as a hashtag, but what does that look like in practice when you really open up? And I know for me, when I was with students and I was really visibly learning alongside them and authentically saying, if I didn't know the answer to something, I was going to help them find out and find out along with them. That type of mindset and that type of way of being really helped both the kids and me to flourish. So that authenticity really comes as a core value for me with mindfulness. And yeah.
There's my alarm again.
See, there's that humor. I love it.
No, sorry. We're going to take a few more minutes to hear from Caitlin, and then we're going to open up for some questions. So as we're talking, friends, if you have some questions, please enter them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we attend to those in a few minutes. So I love what you're saying about awareness, advancing, and authenticity. And I agree. When I know with my students and with my own children, because I am a mom, when I'm authentic with them, they're much more receptive to my guidance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like they see you and there's a certain partnership, and yeah, it's a mutuality, I think, of understandings and an opening. Parker Palmer has a phrase, you know, about Mobius strips, and our inner and outer worlds are very connected in this day and age. And I think that can be both hard and also very freeing. You know, when we see, oh, okay, I don't have to put on the armor every day, and I can be human, and part of that is actually a superpower in certain ways.
Yes, yes. And I think part of that too, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Caitlin. When it comes to tech, especially social media, I think people do feel that need in some ways to be superhuman or to present themselves as perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, this is a question that I wonder about a lot. How can we use technology, social media, as a tool for authenticity rather than as a platform for trying to portray perfection?
Yeah. But I think one of the words curiosity comes to mind. Like, how can we use it as a way to be curious and to help others? Like, really, we're taking away a lot. I have Austin Kleon's book somewhere around here, Show Your Work. And I've been in a virtual community with Howard Rheingold and friends. And we're really talking about that. What does it mean in this day and age not to think of transactional relationships? Like what can I get from this, and therefore I'm in this space. Again, back to mindfulness, I say lose yourself to find yourself. If you're in a state of wonder in an experience, and you're on a certain site, or you're in a certain place technologically, also to find out, then naturally it's going to lead you to the people who are meant to be part of a cohort with you for some reason. And that co-engagement, I think, it engenders relational trust. You have to talk with people a little bit more. So again, I think going in with an open mind rather than an agenda is what part of these practices helps to sustain. So I see the work that we're both doing in education, you know, actually teaching teachers, students how to be more agile, you know, how to do all the things that the future of work says is needed. You know, the World Economic Forum rolled out new skills for leadership that include things like social emotional skills and creativity. And that flexibility of mindset, not thinking that there's one right way, but that there could be multiple approaches to a problem. You know, now I'm using this with design thinking and with tools that I'm bringing into education. You know, and I think that's part of the context. And that's why I love that we're having this talk today, because sometimes I think it used to be like SEL and mindfulness were a separate checkbox, like, oh yeah, I've done that, or I covered that in school, or oh, I gave students that session one day. And now we're at the stage where we're talking about how do we integrate that level of care, respect for self and each other, and use technology, you know, back to your point, use technology in a way that's also meaningful. It's just another it's another environment, but it's still us. It's still us driving it, and it still has the same social emotional needs for it to be healthy, you know, promoting well-being. This is the future of life, I think.
And I love what you're saying, because I think for a long time we had the idea that SEL and mindfulness were competitive agendas, and they're not. I mean, it's all together the same, and it's really focused on wholeness and well-being and promoting that well-being for kids, families, educators, communities. And I agree with you that we need to look at how we can use technology as a tool for connection rather than letting it be master of us. And I think that's sometimes the challenge, because we can be slaves to our phones, in particular. But yeah, this is good. So, friends, if you have questions, please, again, jump in and share those. Oh, we have one. And while I'm pulling that up, it was just a thank you. Well, you're welcome. And we will share the link so you can share with others. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. I should add, I guess, if people are having to jump out, that I know I wanted to offer a code. We haven't really talked about the book, but I did write a book with a bunch of mindfulness exercises, SEL included in curriculum. And for this webinar special, there's a discount code that I'm going to send out to all of the people in the webinar. So I'll put the bit.ly here so that if people, is that all right?
Yes, thank you.
So Mindful by Design is the book, and there are exercises in there, and I wanted to just offer it to people at discount. And also, if you follow that bit.ly, hopefully it works. If somebody can test it and then put in the chat, it works. If you just put your email there, then I'll send everybody the notes from this session, coupled with ways to have this book at discount if you would like it. It has exercises for adults, teachers, as well as students. And what I was trying to do really is save people time and also integrate them into curriculum areas. So the exercises are also coded by science and math. You could use them in any classroom, but they're designed to really be linked to outcomes and topics. So some things are like virtual worlds and designing mindful learning spaces, or storytelling, empathy exercises, and nature journaling. Anyway, so just wanted to offer that as well. Oh, yes, and the screenshot of the notebook. Yes, Jennifer, I'm going to add it. You'll get everything.
Yes. I don't know if you can see it, but we have a question from another friend of mine, Casey. And he says, I don't think SEL and mindfulness is part of our current tech programs policies in K-12, particularly as we move towards more blended and personalized learning. So how might we as educators and leaders operationalize this work strategically with students in Generation Alpha and their current tech interface and school's digital climate, which is in school and beyond school time?
Gosh.
That's a big question, Casey.
Thanks, Casey.
Yes,
good. I'll start taking a stab.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I think it pains me when people say that they've had a burnout and then they need these type of skills. You know, like people do suffer. And I think different researchers, Jean Twenge is one of them. I can put all of this into the post hoc resources, but they've done research that probably since 2012, like the rise of the cell phone, there's been a lot of different drops in well-being and rises in depression, especially for adolescents, teens, you know. And I think that part of this is you could approach from a statistical argument that we need to be encompassing. You know, the SEL model actually says that it's to teach to the whole learner and teach to the whole child. CASEL is one of the organizations that really promotes, you know, how to approach SEL and skills. And, you know, when they look at this skill set, it's not against academics. It's not against cognitive learning. It's really the whole learner and the whole being. So, you know, one step is definitely buy-in from administrators. And sometimes that buy-in happens from logical statistics and scientific journals. And I have a lot of research that will help you, Casey, with your argument, you know, for it. I think another beauty about the social media world is that other teachers, maybe in other schools, have resources and show, oh, this is, you know, working in my school environment, and we're doing different work incorporating SEL mindfulness with tech.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, Tamara, I'm curious to hear what you would say, because I know in the summer when I wrote those 2 articles that partly brought us together, I was looking at, okay, what programs in EdTech are really flying and also building in SEL as part of their ground structure, not an add-on coding, but part of the ground values.
Right.
And that's another, those 2 articles, I'll point Casey in that direction,
Yes.
and everybody from the chat, because they have a lot of detailed examples.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think?
I'm going to take a shot at this before we wrap up, because I want to be mindful of people's time, even though you and I could talk all afternoon. Yeah, I would say it starts like what you were saying, Caitlin, that we have to be mindful of laying a foundation. And there is that word mindful, because I think it means being intentional, to create a mission, vision, and values that promote SEL and mindfulness, so that it's part of what we do when we do school, so that tech is not separate from the experience of SEL. SEL is part of the culture and therefore impacts the climate. Tech is then a tool that we use to create and to bring people together. So it's a very different perspective, I think, than just thinking about what happens on your online experience. It's more holistic. Then Casey, this is great. You have such good questions. He's asking now, how do we determine impact, quantitative and qualitative, of SEL and mindfulness programs with students as we look at these programs as interventions? Having metrics to address positive impact is a key measure of adoption of programs. So, Caitlin, I'll throw this to you first. I have some thoughts, but I want to see what you have to say when it comes to the assessment piece.
Well, I think in the first article, there's one in July for EdSurge, and I'd done research, and it showed that actually having SEL components increases outcomes. So you can see from the data and stats that having some level of social emotional values at the base of learning is helping, especially with tech, giving it a sense of purpose, meaning, back to authenticity. But these are buzzwords. What do they look like when we use them? I was inspired by what you were just saying, Tamara, too, thinking about how a school, sometimes I think words like SEL or words like mindfulness, people might think, oh, that's me or that's not me. And the reverse is, maybe I would be approaching somebody thinking, oh, the tech director doesn't know anything about social emotional learning. But what if I assume the opposite, that people's values are all that they would want to teach to a whole learner? And of course, they'd want to approach well-being.
Right.
But they probably haven't had time to really explore, what does SEL mean? How do I unpack this? How do I take some of these systems that haven't been in place for a long time? It's really hard. They say change happens, slower than our knowledge of what we want to advance toward. So I think part of this community of change is about maybe reframing who we might think were outliers and turning them into allies. How do we actually form allegiances by talking about across different silos of areas in the school? We're all kind of pointing toward the same purpose. And again, like you were saying, I loved how you framed it with tech, being that vehicle. It's not the thing itself. It's what's leading us toward the outcome. And essentially, I think sometimes getting students involved, we might think of them as maybe the last piece of the puzzle when they enter the room and they start engaging with the materials. But sometimes I used to have students put up on a wall, what are your values? And I'd always have that on my classroom wall.
I love that.
Words that they associate with what they want in a community. Because I think having the student voices, students now are really eager to storytell, share their voice, and have it be something heart-centered. Yeah, it's a complex issue, but I think it's a good one that we're addressing. And I put that out there, that if you're one of those people that either feels alone in your community, or you want to solve these big complex issues, A, there are others like you, and B, the work that we're both doing wants to bring people together. So please join the groups we have, and there'll be more resources to share.
Yes. Well, we have gone over time, and I'm so glad. I know the half an hour flew. So, friends, thank you so much for joining us today. Our guest is Caitlin Krause, and we will be sharing lots of resources. You can watch for those in the follow-up emails as well as on social media, the bit.ly, so you can obtain Mindful by Design, Caitlin's book, and keep in touch with her, as well as be part of the Love in a Big World community. Caitlin, thank you so much. Thanks for your time and for all the energy and effort you put into today's conversation. And I hope we can do it again. Would you be okay? Okay, because I feel like we just scratched the surface.
This is not an if, this is a when.
Okay, great.
I've had all this energy from this morning and anticipating this session together. Just thank you to everybody who's here in the room, the collective room of the world. And I have to say, I love poetry. So I wanted to just close with a line that I love. It hit me today. Thinking about love in a big world, I started reading some Derek Walcott, and I love him as a poet. Just inspirational in so many ways. And he has a line from a poem called Love After Love that, I'll just read the line, but it's beautiful. He says, "Give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life." And I think we all need to trust to give back our hearts to itself. Kids do too. Sometimes they need us to help lead them there, but part of this is about bringing love back visibly into the world that we've created, and it's a beautiful world. Like there's so much to enjoy and to appreciate, and part of this gratitude exercise for me is just to dwell in that. And thank you, and thanks to the community here.
Well, thank you very much. You're an amazing person, and I'm glad we're friends.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Until next time, this is Tamara with Love in a Big World and Caitlin Krause. Have a great day.
Yeah, have a great day. Bye. Thank you. I'll stay here for a little bit.
Okay.